What's up, yins, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Fishing PA with Ryan Reed. You know, one of the most commonly asked questions that I get from friends, family, and new anglers, especially new anglers, being that I'm always trying to get people involved in the sport of fishing, has to do with fishing line. Now, I'm always being asked, what type of line do I use? Or what type of line should I use on a specific rod and reel combo? Or even what type of line is the best for a specific technique of fishing, like vertical jigging, or drop shotting, or spinner baiting, so on and so forth. So what I thought I'd do is put a quick video together, talk about the 3 types of line that I use here in the state of PA, and give you guys the pros and cons on each one, and hopefully it'll teach you guys something new. Now before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to G Baby. This one's for you. Now some of you are thinking, why is he doing another episode on something that someone else has already done? I think it's important, especially for what I'm trying to do to try to teach people, that I create a playlist for fishing for beginners. So this video kind of falls in line with what I'm trying to accomplish. So when we talk about fishing line, we're really talking about 3 types of line. We're talking about braided or super line, kind of like that Suffix 832. We're talking about fluorocarbon, and we're talking about monofilament. So I'm going to break each of these down and give you guys pros and cons that will hopefully help you out. Okay, we're going to start by talking about monofilament. Now monofilament is a type of line that's primarily made out of nylon, and it's primarily a single strand, similar to what I have here. Now monofilament is really known for its ability to stretch. So what mono will give you is a fairly decent hook set because the line's going to stretch when you set the hook. However, mono is also known for being prone to abrasions. So it's not really good for when you're fishing around big cover like rocks or big wood like logs and stumps, because if this gets caught up, it's likely to snap. Now another important thing about mono is that it actually floats. So monofilament, unlike fluorocarbon, mono floats whereas fluorocarbon sinks. And we're going to talk about why that's important here in a minute. Now one style of fishing that monofilament is really excellent for is for topwater baits. And the reason for that is that this mono, again, it floats. So what it's going to allow you to get is that full action out of your topwater lures. So again, monofilament is excellent for any lure that stays higher in the water column or at the very top of the water column. Now another thing that mono has is it actually has a little bit larger of a diameter. And again, the mono is going to give you a thicker line, but it's also going to give you a little bit more stretch. And again, that's key because that helps with your hook sets. So it's very, very good for bass fishing and for pan fishing, because that extra stretch on a tight drag reel is going to give you guys a much better hookup ratio when you're talking about that style of fishing. Another really sweet tip for monofilament is actually using it with jerk baits, especially in cold water situations. The reason for that is, again, mono floats. So what this is going to allow you to do with your jerk baits is actually give them a little bit longer of a pause that's going to allow that bait to sit more motionless in the water, which may actually force a strike out of a sluggish fish. So there's a couple rules of thumb that I live by when I'm talking about monofilament. And that's typically 8 pounds in clear water and 12 pound in muddy water. That gives you the extra poundage and a little bit more durability when you're talking about this sort of line, because again, it's prone to abrasions. Also, the heavier the lures you're throwing, the heavier the line should be. That will give you guys enough power in the line to actually throw a little bit bigger baits. And also, the thicker the cover, the heavier the line, which also gives you a better chance of not getting broken off when you're fishing around cover. One thing to always watch out for though, the more heavy the line you go, the stronger the possibility it is for you to deaden the action of the lure, which happened to me on Lake Chautauqua when we were walleye fishing this year. You got to be careful because the heavier the line you go, the more there is an opportunity for that lure to lose the action just because of the weight of the line. One last tip about monofilament. Sometimes this line works really, really good in cold water scenarios. So when you guys are thinking about throwing a wacky rig or some kind of slow plastic like this, sometimes monofilament will actually allow that bait to drop a little slower, again because it floats, which in cold water scenarios could actually force a strike. So apply that also to vertical jigging because it's going to do the same thing. When you're vertical jigging, sometimes this line, being that it has a tendency to float, is going to make that bait just flutter for a second longer and slow it down in the water column, which may be a huge benefit, especially in the cold weather months. Okay, to recap monofilament. It's a thicker diameter line, it's got great stretch, it's very effective when you're talking about top water type presentations, and it's also very effective in cold water presentations because it allows that bait to sink just a little bit slower than fluorocarbon. The downfall again is that it's prone to abrasions and it's very, very difficult to fish in heavy cover. Alright guys, the next line we're going to talk about is actually fluorocarbon. Now fluorocarbon is made with a substance called polyvinylidene fluoride. And what that substance actually allows is for this line to sink into the water column. Now fluorocarbon is known for its low visibility, its thin diameter, and also its high level of sensitivity. But the nice thing about fluorocarbon is it offers you the same stretch factor as monofilament. In addition to that, fluorocarbon is abrasion resistant, so it's less likely to get broken off when you're fishing around big cover like rocks, stumps, and anything else in the water that may affect your line. Now a couple rules of thumb with fluorocarbon. Before you guys tie your knot on the end of your lure or your leader or whatever you're doing, make sure you wet it down. That's a key factor. If you don't wet it, the line is likely to snap because of the pressure. So with fluoro, you've got to wet it down. Now fluorocarbon, being that it sinks, it's not real good for topwater lures, like mono. So fluorocarbon is going to be a little bit of an adjustment because it's going to sink lower in the water column, which gives you added benefits for some other type of baits, just not topwater lures. However, with fluorocarbon, use the fact that this drops much more quickly in the water column versus mono, use that to your advantage. When you're throwing wacky rigs or Texas rigs or any type of plastic, or you're vertical jigging, or you're just throwing a deep running crankbait, this line is going to get that lure down in the water column a lot more quickly than mono, and it's going to actually allow your crankbaits to continue to run deeper. So just to recap fluorocarbon, it's got a thin diameter, it's low visibility, it's got great sensitivity, and it's tough as nails. You guys can use this line for deeper water presentations and it'll be very good to you. So the last type of line that we're going to talk about is braided or super line. Now I primarily use super line on the majority of my rod and reel combos, especially when I'm musky fishing. Braid is actually made out of a few different substances like Dacron or even Spectra. And what this braid is, it's actually a woven line of those fibers that allows you to get a really tight, thin diameter, but a very, very strong line. Now, braided line is very similar to monofilament in the way that it floats. So again, braid is going to stay at the top of the water and it's going to allow that bait to sink slower because it floats. However, this line and all types of braided line are very good for multiple types of rod and reel combos like spinning reels and also your bait casters. One really cool fact about braid though is the thin diameter actually cuts through the water. So what that gives you is a really solid line to troll lures with. Because when you're trolling this type of a line, it actually cuts through the water and it will allow your bait to run a little bit deeper in the water column. Now, one downfall of braid is that there's literally no stretch in this line. You cannot stretch braid because there's zero stretch. So what that does is sometimes that'll hinder hook sets, especially when you're vertical jigging or you're offering a presentation that requires that really hard hook set. Now, some guys will argue with me. I've never personally had that big of an issue with my hook sets with braid. It's just a fact of using this type of braid that there's no stretch. The answer for that to me is just loosening the drag on your reel, which allows you to kind of set that hook and give some of that line back. So again, I've never really had a problem with this type of line, and I'd be curious to hear if you guys have had any issues with hook sets, being that the braid doesn't have any stretch. Now, one nice thing about braid though, is you guys can actually use like a fluorocarbon leader that will give you just a little bit more stretch when you're talking about that hook set. So realistically, the no stretch factor shouldn't be that big of a deal. So when we talk about braid, we talk about it being abrasion resistant. Now this has the diameter of 6-pound monofilament, but it's actually 20-pound test. So this line is ridiculously tough. You can fish heavy cover and you can fish all types of areas with this braid and it's going to stand up for you, especially the Suffix 832. This is just magical fishing line that I have on pretty much every single one of my bass rods. Okay, so to recap braid or super lines. They have a very thin diameter, but they are super strong. They're abrasion resistant and these types of lines float. So what this is going to give you, it's going to give you a little bit of a hybrid. It's going to give you a really solid product. Again, the only downfall is that there's no stretch. Use your fluorocarbon leaders to kind of combat that or loosen the drag slightly on your reels. One thing I'll say about braid, someone recently told me within the last 6 months, do not even talk about monofilament or fluorocarbon when you're musky fishing. And I have to say, I completely agree with him. When you're talking about braid, 20 to 30 pound for bass, and I'll even go up from 30 to 50 for pike. But when I'm musky fishing now, I primarily tie on 80-pound test right there. And really, this line has never failed me even one time when I've actually hooked a fish. Okay, just quickly, I want to talk about my 3 favorite types of line, one of each. So first and foremost, we're going to start with the Berkley Trilene Extra Tough, so the big XT. Now primarily I'll go with the 8-pound test when I'm walleye fishing or even when I'm fishing for bass. The Berkley Trilene XT is a super tough monofilament and it's going to hold up for you. Now secondly, I want to talk about fluorocarbon. And I standardize on the Berkley Vanish. It's clear, it's invisible underwater, and I primarily use this when I'm trout fishing. It gives you low visibility and easy casting. So realistically, it's a solid fluorocarbon. Lastly, when I'm talking about braid, I always go with the Suffix 832. I've recently been trying some new stuff. I picked up some of the Power Pro, but the Suffix 832 has been a standard for me. It's really great line. It doesn't rat's nest or it doesn't backlash very easily. So again, this is a great product. You guys should definitely check out the Suffix 832 because it's strong, it's durable, and it really does not fail under high pressure situations when you got a big fish on the other end. Okay, just a few tips with regards to line maintenance. One thing you guys got to watch out for with monofilament is monofilament actually needs changed more frequently because sunlight affects its durability over time. So it's good for you guys to continuously check your mono rods and make sure you guys stay on top of actually switching that line out. I can tell you when I use mono, it gets new line every single year, sometimes multiple times a year. Now with fluorocarbon, the maintenance is a little bit more easy because it's not really affected by sunlight. Fluorocarbon, the way you guys know when that line goes bad is the fluorocarbon actually turns kind of like a milky brown on your reel. So whenever it gets to that point, that's when you guys want to change it out. I typically change my fluorocarbon yearly. Now that's up to you guys. Sometimes you can get multiple years out of it. Just check your rod and reel combos and make sure if you have fluoro on, it's not a milky or a brownish color because that means it's going bad. Now lastly, from a maintenance standpoint, braid is really the way to go. You guys can spin up some braid on your rod and reel combos and you guys do not have to change this yearly. This braid holds up under all types of weather conditions. It's not affected by sun and it just really takes abuse. So when you guys spool your rod and reel combos up with this Suffix 832 or your choice of braid, You're not going to have to do much maintenance on this, at least for a couple of years. Now, another question that I get regarding fishing line is what color of line do I use? So fluorocarbon's easy. Fluorocarbon is typically clear, and its refractive index is the same as water. So what that means is when light passes through it, it actually goes invisible in the water. So for fluorocarbon, most of them are clear. I always stick with clear. That's going to give you guys that low visibility, especially when you're trout fishing, so it doesn't spook the fish. Now monofilament, it's interesting because they actually have multiple colors. I actually kind of like the yellow for mono because it helps me keep track of that line, especially when you guys are using plastics. Because Texas rigging with plastic baits such as that is really all about the feel. When you guys feel that bite, you set the hook. Well, with the yellow monofilament, I can actually watch my line and I can see that activity. The downfall is it's high visibility, so the fish are likely to see it. Now with braid, there's a lot of different colors. I've been kind of itching to try the white because I hear the white is low vis. However, as of right now, I standardize on green. It's always green because green is low vis in the water or virtually invisible. So when you guys are looking at braid, try different colors. I personally am going to stick with green. It really works out great for me. All right, boys and girls, I know I threw a lot of information at you, and I know this discussion can be somewhat boring. However, for those of you that are looking to get into the sport of fishing or have questions on fishing line in particular, I'm hoping that this information was beneficial for you. Now, Greg, G, I did this video for you, so I'm hoping you find something beneficial that'll kind of help you out in your quest to start fishing. Now, if you guys like this video, feel free to hit that like button for me. If you guys like this content overall, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Now, I really enjoy doing videos like this because it's helping me learn so much more about the sport of fishing, and it really helps me do what I love to do, and that's catch more fish. So if there's something that you guys want to see in particular, always feel free to reach out to me, leave me a comment or shoot me a message, and I'll do my best to get you guys a video on it. This is not only a learning experience for those of you that want to watch these types of videos, but it also helps me learn so much more. So again, I'm really enjoying doing this, and I'm hoping you guys get some benefit out of it. I'm hoping you guys can get out fishing soon because it's been raining the last couple days here in Western Pennsylvania, and I am itching to get back out there. So I hope you guys can get out soon. Thank you again for watching. Guys, take care.